All right, so we got a lot of injuries to go over today, but let's start off with Dak Prescott, who I think is going to be out for the remainder of the season. He has what they call a hamstring avulsion injury. So we've talked about gradings of hamstrings where you have a grade 1 that's inflammation, a grade 2 that's a significant tear, and a grade 3 that's a complete tear. We didn't talk about avulsion injuries. That's where that top white tendon area attaches to that ischium, that part of that hip bone. And when it's injured so badly, it provides traction on that bone and it actually pulls off a chunk of that bone. In addition to that, there's also a tearing of the hamstring that happens, and what they have to do is they have to reattach the hamstring to the bone. And they do that by putting sutures in, as you can see right there. They stitch through that tendon and anchor it into that ischial tuberosity. So the issue with this is obviously recovery. So even if they decide to not do surgery, I mean, Dak's not going to be back. Hamstring strains that are grade 2 or more take about 6 to 7 weeks to recover from in conservative cases. So that's without operation. So we're at week 10 now. That puts him at week 17. So we're out over there. What about surgery? So the surgery is a little bit of a longer recovery because you need to also recover from the surgery as well. So go through rehab. You're significantly more limited in terms of your mobility because you don't want to disturb the surgical hardware and all of that. So all of that is basically saying that once you hear the word avulsion or torn off bone, you're looking at immediately a 6 to 7 week period. And based on the timing of season that we're in, that means that Dak's out. That also affects Ceedee Lamb's value going forward. So I would trade appropriately if you get a reasonable offer because Ceedee Lamb is a stud player. He's also playing through injury though, and he's going to be playing with a different quarterback. Until then, I still think that you should start Ceedee, even with the quarterback play and playing through injury, because of the aforementioned really good player that he is. Let's do a quick update on Nico Collins because unfortunately he also didn't play today. So although I was optimistic on him playing, now we're reaching a warning level of him still not practicing on Thursday. He only has one more day to show us that he's going to practice. If you got a player going on Thursday, unfortunately, I would say that you probably should go with that Thursday player rather than risk waiting for Nico Collins. I still am slightly optimistic that he plays, but I don't think it's worth the risk in regards to him not practicing yet. It's weird that they said he passed all the tests and they're still not activating his period. I'm sorry about that. Now let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. He has a left shoulder injury, so he's a right-handed player, so this is a little bit different, but they also say that he's looking at surgery. When they say he's considering surgery, then that means that it's not a rotator cuff tear, because rotator cuff tear requiring surgery is not really something you can play through. It's got a lot of pain with it, a lot of weakness with it, and it'll really affect your motion even on the non-dominant hand. When you're talking about a possible surgical shoulder issue, they're most likely talking about a labrum tear. And a labrum tear is that capsule that helps cradle the humerus, that long arm bone there in the shoulder joint. When it's torn, there's a little bit more instability. There's sometimes a painful clicking that's involved with it, and your shoulder can more easily dislocate as well. The things they can do for it are if it's not significantly unstable and it's more of a pain issue, then you can do a different type of injection. We already talked about that AC joint injection, and this injection would be called an intra-articular shoulder injection. Once again, needs to be done with ultrasound guidance to make sure that you're getting into that shoulder joint, because although you can try landmark-based, and a landmark-based injection is basically you finding the anatomic points on someone's body and you angling the shoulder in approximately the right way, that should get you into the joint, and then you should feel a little bit of a punch that tells you you're in the capsule. But as you can tell, a lot of this stuff is kind of inaccurate because you're basing it on a feeling, and with the imaging guidance, you can tell specifically that you got in by looking at the picture. So although landmark-based injections are possible, you should usually go to a physician who's doing imaging-guided injections because on average it'll be a more accurate way. That being said, there's a chance that Trevor Lawrence does play throughout this season with a torn labrum on his non-dominant shoulder. He can manage the pain conservatively, but in the situation that he ends up getting surgery, then that'll be a season-ending condition and he will be out for the remainder of the season. Baker Mayfield has been held out of practice, I think one day this week with a toe injury. He says he's going to play this Sunday. He's usually pretty reliable in terms of when he's saying he's playing through injuries. And I haven't heard anything like, say, a turf toe or anything like that would make me more concerned about it. So I do think that Baker will suit up this weekend. And I think if he's your starting quarterback, then you probably have other better wide receivers and running back, but I do think he's a viable fantasy play. And then why don't we end with some good news for once? So Devonta Smith, he had a hamstring injury. Usually that says that they're out when it pops up later on, but he's already back on the practice field. So I do think that he plays this weekend, and I would be starting him, although he is a high injury risk. We've seen before, players like Mike Evans, they go out there, they try and play through it, and they can aggravate it. It's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking, in my opinion, just based on its upside.